to another episode of Lisa at the Edge. Thanks so much for taking the time to join. And on this episode, I'm super excited because I finally have Jonah Andersson on the podcast. Hey, Jonah.
Hi, Lisa. It's so great to be at Lisa at the Edge show or podcast today. Thank you for inviting me.
I know we've had this planned for a while, and we were originally going to record last year before I took a bit of a break, and I'm so glad we've been able to align diaries. So for those who don't know Jonah is a Microsoft MVP. She is huge in the Microsoft community, very passionate about mentorship community activities, and is also a software engineer. So Jonah, I mean, I've just introduced you there anyway, but do you want to go ahead and do your own little introduction?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching us and joining us today. So my name is Jonah Andersson. And as Lisa introduced, I'm also a Microsoft MVP for Azure, like Lisa. And I am working as a software developer consultant at Forefront Consulting here in Sweden. And I'm also the founder of and community leader of Azure User Group Sweden. And I'm a very big fan of both coding, I love programming, and also I advocate gender diversity within tech. So that's why I have this t-shirt with me today.
Oh, I love
It's
it.
code.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, that is
Yes.
amazing. That is amazing. So as always, me and Jonah had a little bit of a prep chat last week. And again, it was one of those amazing conversations that we probably should have just hit the record button on. But I'm super excited to record with you today. So we're gonna start, as always, on the podcast, finding out just a little bit about your background and how you got into tech and your journey, and sort of sharing. It's a very inspirational journey, so sharing more around that. And then we're going to chat a little bit about, both me and Jonah are just going to share a few things that we've learned over the last few years in our career, why we are both such open books, why we think that's important. And then we're going to hear a little bit more from Jonah on her, mentorship and community side of things, and also finish up with the very exciting writing a book, which is very impressive, and it's how to get started in Azure, and I'm really excited to learn more about that as well. So let's kick this off. Jonah,
Yes.
did you always want to be in tech, or when you were younger did you have visions of being something else when you grew up?
Yes, that's a great question, which is also very important when it comes to inspiring others to work and get started with a tech job. So my my tech story is very special because from the beginning, I didn't actually intend to work as a programmer. Actually, I wanted to be a civil engineer, and my story actually started in the Philippines. To those who don't know, I'm a Filipina, born in the Philippines, but I'm currently based and living in Sweden for the past 10, 11 years. And my story started in the Philippines. I wanted to be a civil engineer because I wanted to sketch buildings and build something. But then to make the long story short, without digging into details, because of the life circumstances and family stuff, my parents couldn't afford to send me to school because back then in the Philippines, until now, it's not free to go for to college. So you have to pay for an education. So when I was in high school, I decided to take a scholarship that was available back then, and I was blessed and happy that I got into the scholarship of the top 100 students that got it. But I didn't have the option to choose civil engineering, and the option that I had is to go in a local private college that offers computer science. So that's the beginning of my story in tech. I started studying computer science, and my first programming language that I learned was Visual Basic. So that's how I got started. And then I worked in different roles within customer service and tech support, and even as a travel consultant until I moved to Sweden, studied more programming, and now I'm working as a software engineer for the past 7, 8 years in Sweden.
Wow,
Long
that's
story.
yes.
Long story. I tried to compress the 10, 15 years.
And there's so much in there, right? And there's so
Yes.
much so much experience in there as well, because even though you studied computer science, you didn't necessarily jump into being a coder straight away, right? Like you
Yes.
said, you worked as a travel consultant, and you actually worked, was it IT support that
Yes.
you did in the
Yeah.
early days?
Yeah, I did work for my first job was in 2006, just like a year, I mean, a few years or 2 years after my mother died, because my mother died of breast cancer, year 2004, when I was just turning turning into the adulthood, you can say it, like 18,
Wow.
19. And when I finished studying college, I mean, computer science back then, that was also when my mother died. And as the eldest child of the family back then, I had to support my sisters and brother because, to make the long story short, I was my father was not really was not responsible enough to take over. So
Okay.
I took over the responsibility as the breadwinner of the
Mhm.
family. And
Wow.
instead of working as a programmer after school, I had to take the closest tech job I could had in the city with good pay. So my first job was a tech support for an American company back then. So that was my job, first
Yes,
job.
that's a lot there. So you basically took on responsibility for your siblings. You became the breadwinner, and so yeah, getting started in IT was more about what is the closest tech job that will earn me the most money, that will allow me to support my family, which is in itself a huge thing, right? It's sacrifice on one hand, but
Yes.
also so admirable as well. Um, and then, and we briefly spoke about this, that the experience working as IT support for the tech company and even working as a travel consultant meant that you got um, experience that you wouldn't have necessarily gained had you just gone straight into coding, right? So you
Yes.
you you gained experience in terms of how applications are used in the real world, or the actual impact they have on businesses. Um,
Yes.
and that is something that you seem to have carried with you throughout your career. So not just focusing on the code, but actually focusing on the business outcomes as well. Um,
Yes.
did you think
That's
that
right.
that was sort of invaluable experience?
Yes, I agree. So even if right after school I wasn't working uh, as a programmer or software developer as the first job, but I prioritized taking care of my siblings, sending
Yeah.
out them to school. But as a technical support for an American international company, I gained a lot of experience working with customer service.
Yep.
And so what I did, just to give a background, so as a technical support back then, my first job, people call in to the customer service because they need help with a fiber service or internet
Okay.
problems.
Yep.
So while they're in the States, I help them, and I worked night shift in the Philippines back then. But to make the long story short, my customer service experience have actually helped me in my journey into software development, because as a software developer, I like the idea that I code in the code, I mean, the functionality of the system, but I'm a type of developer that thinks outside the box in a way that I care about the business. I care about the users that will use what I'm building in this
Yep.
system. So I listen with open ears, the
Yep.
customer service side of me and the coder part of me. So I like that combination.
Yep. That's amazing. And then so you then moved to Sweden, right? And that's where you started your developer journey. And
Yes.
when you moved to Sweden, you undertook some more learning in software development. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Because so I started working my first job as a tech support 2006 in the Philippines. But then when I moved to Sweden
Mm-hmm.
2011,
Yep.
I had to start from scratch again. I had to learn Swedish, so I can speak Swedish as well. I had to start learning Swedish, and I started studying for 3 to 4 years in software development as an agile .NET developer and also Java development. Until I got my first job as a software developer consultant here.
Wow. So you moved to a brand new country. You had to learn you had to learn a new language. You had
Yes.
to then study in that new country with that new language before getting your first software developer job. And so I mean, that just shows such great resilience. It shows grit. It shows determination. Is that because you wanted to continue down the software development path? What was it about software development that made you want to continue down that path? Because I mean, there would have been easier paths to take, right? You could have moved to Sweden and you could have left tech, you could have done other jobs, you could have stayed in technical support. What was it about software development that made you want to continue down that path?
Yes, that's a great question, Lisa. I think the stepping stone that I had in the Philippines that kind of got broken or something like that got lost when I had to prioritize taking care of my family. Yet,
Yeah,
I had to when I moved to a new country, everything was new, and I wanted to try something that or set a goal that I want to do something that I really love doing. And as I mentioned from the beginning, I wanted to be a civil engineer because I want to build something. And
yeah,
I decided I'm gonna go for software development, and I worked through my path there, studied more. It was tough being in a Swedish class, but I worked hard for it and with patience and determination. And yes, and I love software development because you build things that helps other people, and that's my motivation. Because as a software, I mean, as a customer service person, and a person who loves tech, I want to use my skills in tech to help customers, to help users. And that's like what I love about tech as well, because you learn new things, and I'm that type of person.
yeah. You want to always be learning new things, and
Yes.
I love that. So when you were younger, you wanted to build things, and your view at that time was that was going to be civil engineering, but actually you found through taking computer science and studying software development that you can still build things, but it was just in a different way. Yeah, so using software. And then I love the fact that you then tied that back with basically who you are as a person, who is you are a helper, you are a carer, you're someone who wants to support other people, and being able to tie those things together is really powerful. And I really like as well the fact that you said that when you came to Sweden and it was a new country, that you wanted to do something that you enjoyed. Because to be fair, whilst it's super admirable of you for what you did for your family, you did sacrifice, a little bit of what maybe you wanted to do. And I just love the fact that that story really demonstrates that that's okay and you can do that, but always come back to yourself and always take some time for yourself, because it's really important to enjoy what you do. Um,
Yes, I
really,
agree.
really important.
Yeah, I like what you said there also. Like, I'm following my dreams to work in
Mhm.
tech, at the same time not losing my, what do you call that, integrity as a person, my dreams. And it's like it's combining the tech and non-tech aspect of you. So I like that combination, that right, like you're coding, for example, and then you help the customer. So I really like, that's what makes software development or working in IT very fun. And that's also one of the reasons that I'm very passionate and not shy to share my story and my successes, how it was for me and my journey now, so that I can inspire others as well that are they're trying to get into tech. So hopefully we can make a difference, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We spoke about this briefly, about the fact that we are both in our own ways open books, quite open, quite honest. And we spoke a little bit of why we do that. And as you said, there is to inspire other people. But it also ties back to something else that we've just spoken about, in the fact that there is technology, and that's great. But technology at the end of the day is built by people, used by people, sold by people, bought by people. And it's really the human element that I think keeps me in tech. Like, the tech is cool, but it is definitely the human element. And we spoke a little bit about this, in that if we are to realize the power of the technology that we have at our fingertips, we really need a diverse group of people who feel comfortable and safe sharing their ideas, and not sort of being scared to be wrong or suggest something silly. And I think we spoke about this when we first met, that a big reason for us being so open and honest is to show others that it's okay. Because ultimately,
Yes.
we need people to feel comfortable and to be able to share how they're feeling, what they like doing, what they don't like doing, what they find hard.
Yes, I
Which is,
agree.
it's an interesting intersection of tech and
Yes, yeah, I like that we're talking like this, because like when you're also an MVP, and as an MVP we contribute a lot to the community. We do public speaking, we write blog posts, we share a lot of our knowledge. But I think one of the things that we can be better of as experts is to be more open about how we feel, the human part of us, because that's what keeps people in tech, as you said, regardless of whatever role you have. And I have something to share. Yeah, we didn't discuss this last time, but I had a tech story when I was still beginning to apply for a job as a software developer here in Sweden, first time after school. I applied for a job many times. Like, I was starting my journey. It was tough. Now I have it good. But when I was searching for job, I had to apply like 100 jobs announcement per day just to get that job that I want in software development. And then there
yeah,
was one time I was in one of the local cities nearby. I applied for a job as a Java developer because I also studied Java development. And one example that I thought I would share to our audience and our listeners today is that when I went for that job interview, I had to do a coding test.
okay, yep,
And when I went to that coding test, I I was prepared to do the coding test, but when I went into the room, there were two programmers, tough guys. They
okay,
looked like that, and then
yep,
when they said, so it's like they instructed me, sit there, take the exam. But while I'm sitting on the computer and trying to solve the problem, I was actually nervous because they were sitting behind me or standing behind me and looking at my screen. So that
yep,
was also one example of like interview process when it comes to tech, um that sometimes it can be different person to person. So sometimes we have to kind of like reflect and adjust how we deal with those beginners in tech as well, because
yeah,
sometimes you show yourself, oh, I'm so techy, I'm intimidating, but you don't know that person maybe new in tech. So it is thinking, is this how tech looks like? People look so tough and not so humble. So that's
yeah,
what I thought. You know what I did? I
yeah.
quit. I didn't finish that,
No,
that
I wouldn't
that
have quit
coding.
either.
I walked away. I
That
walked
sounds like
away.
a horrible, uncomfortable environment. Why would you sit down and attempt to finish something just to, make yourself look good to these two,
Yes, yes, yes,
big
yes.
guys? I think I think that is so important, because okay, when companies interview people, it is an investment. it's investment of time and resources, and you want to get the right person for the job. But you also want, I mean, part of being an employer, part of being a manager, etc. these days is about setting people up for success. It's about creating an environment in which they can bring them best selves and they can succeed. And, you know, me and Anna East spoke about this on my last podcast episode in terms of the technical part of the interviews. They are important. You want to be able to make sure that people have the requisite technical skills. But I think what's far more important these days is attitudes and aptitudes, and
Yes.
your approach to solving problems, your ability to ask for help, your ability to work with others, your ability to communicate and listen to customers. I think that is just so much more important. And I would really hope that technical side, it's not something I've ever had to go through. I've spoken to lots of people who have had to go through it. And there definitely does seem to be this view out there that the technical part of the interview is like super scary. And I just think that definitely, I would hope that has changed. Do you think that that's changed these days?
I hope so. I think it's starting to change, hopefully. I actually, I at work, aside from my work as a consultant, I also help with upskilling of competencies in at Forefront, but I also help sometimes with the recruitment. So at work, we had the idea that when there's a new person that will be interviewed, it should be like equally, like one, it should be at least that applicant should meet one developer. If it's a developer role, meet that in a casual conversation, not very tough one, just to give a chance for that applicant to give an insight how it looks for someone who works as a developer in the company. So I think some companies, at least in my company, are starting to think about it, because I wouldn't work in a company that's not thinking about diversity and inclusive workplace, because that's very important for us, that we can be ourselves in a company, or we can do what we want. We have the opportunity to excel and develop a career or role that we want to do within the company, because I always believe that we can be the best that we can be, as long as we have that like arena or open space where we can be who we are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think these days the power balance has shifted, in that it's not all with the companies anymore. People are beginning to think far more about the fact that they want a job that they enjoy. They want an employer who supports them, who will enable them to grow. So potential employees are almost interviewing companies as much as companies are interviewing employees. So I really like that approach of offering up the opportunity to have a casual conversation with someone who's doing your role or similar to your role, or in your and I think talking about having a safe and nurturing environment, we spoke about this briefly as well, and I suppose this kind of falls into being an open book, but also being transparent about how we feel at work. Because I think that something that still isn't where it needs to be is a sort of the uncomfortableness that comes with sharing feelings, you know. And we've seen and heard over the past 2 years about how many people have suffered burnout, etc. And I think it comes from this uncomfortableness of people sharing that their feelings, that they're struggling. So sharing that they're struggling, and we both spoke about this in our catch up, and the fact that I think as we have got more years under our belt, we've become a lot more comfortable at saying when we're struggling. Do you think that's changing? Do you feel comfortable at work to be able to share when you're struggling and ask for help and support?
Yes, I feel that I can be myself at work,
Okay.
especially that I've learned a lot from my journey for the past years, where I had an experience, and not in this current company but a previous company, when I felt left out, and I felt stressful. I felt like after a while I was in a stressful environment,
Okay.
that I couldn't take it anymore, in a way that I really cried at work, and I
Yeah.
was honest to say what I feel. But it was like frustrating, because the people that I expected to be professional, and colleagues that should support, or leaders that should support me, they counted my emotional response to certain situations to be a weakness.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be in that kind of workplace or environment, that I I feel that I don't grow, it doesn't feel supported. So I am not scared to say that's one of the reasons I quit that job, because
Yeah.
it wasn't worth it, especially if it's affecting your health and
Yeah.
you're not growing in your career. So when I broke that, like that part of it, and left it there, left it behind,
Hmm.
I grow and develop to be a better person, because I can handle my emotions better. And when I feel that something doesn't feel right within a certain situation, I lift it up and try to raise that problem,
Yeah.
and get solutions from the people that's involved as well. So it's important that you can lift how I mean voice out how you feel, and at the same time you address it with others that are involved to
Yeah.
solve it.
Absolutely. So not letting it get to the point where it gets so bad that you are so upset. And I definitely can relate to that quite often, especially as a woman in tech. I find myself uh, constantly, there's this little part of my brain that's constantly taken up by thinking, are you being too sensitive? Are you being too emotional? And really, what I'm saying is, will they think that you're being too sensitive? Will they think that you're being too emotional? Are you being too emotional? And that in itself can be quite draining. It is very draining to be constantly questioning yourself as to whether your feelings are valid and if they are okay. And I think that's a sad reality of where a lot of women in tech are. I would say that whether it's consciously or subconsciously, we all go through that every week. But I definitely, over the last few years, have become better at voicing when I am upset. And sometimes it can be really tough because sometimes, it will be the point. I mean, I've definitely suffered this over the last couple of years where I have been really upset. I have cried. My confidence at work has been shattered, to be honest. And I've not felt like I have support because people see that emotion and they see that struggle and they freeze up and they want to protect themselves because it makes them feel so uncomfortable that someone else is being so open and in tune with their emotions. I used to think, oh, that's my fault. I shouldn't have cried. I shouldn't have been so honest. Like, I shouldn't have shared my emotions. I should have just sucked it up and I should have got on with it. But I've learned now that actually their reaction is not it's not me. It's not my fault. It is a reflection of what they're struggling with internally. And
Mm,
it can still be hard, especially when it's people who are in positions that are meant to support you and champion you and
yeah.
protect you and have your back. So I think I said this the other week actually to a friend. I've become a lot better in my sort of last few years at realizing that it's okay to ask for help. It's absolutely okay to ask for help. I don't need to do everything by myself. But what I am definitely learning in the last couple of years is it's also important to know who to ask for help. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not always the people that should help you that you can ask for help. And that's just I think the reality of the kind of world that we live in. So I think it's really important to reach out into the community to like people like yourself and all the people I've met doing this podcast, and there's other people I've become great friends with, and be able to lean on them and hear their experiences. And again, coming back to what we started with, knowing that you're not alone. So sharing how you feel, it's so powerful when someone says, do you know what, I had a similar situation. Do you know what, I really struggled at work last week. And you instantly feel, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And that really, really helps. That really helps.
Yes.
But
I was
yeah.
I was very happy when we we did our catch up last time, because it's been a while since we talked, and then when we did our catch up, and now we're meeting right now. I'm very happy because I got to learn more about you, and we got to learn about each other. So yes, I totally agree about learning and hearing stories and the experiences of others to gain that power. That's why it's very important. Like we're both passionate about community, and that's what makes community, especially in the tech industry, very special, because we we don't think about the different roles that we have, but we think about how we can help each other, how we can share that knowledge together so we grow together. So I really like that.
Yeah, I do really think that the Microsoft community is a great community, and it's so nice to have next to my day job, because it's such a supportive group. And ideally you would get a role where everyone around you in the team and your managers, etc., are all like, great people, and you can have open and honest conversations with them, and that is where we should be trying to get to. But I think that unfortunately, sharing in emotions and feelings and that kind of stuff is still quite difficult in a lot of workplaces, and so having the community support is amazing. And so
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about community and mentorship, because I know those two things are things that you're super passionate about. And actually, I'd like to hear your thoughts on mentorship and its place within tech, both for helping people develop in their careers, but then does it have a place in terms of what we've just spoken about, and help, sort of supporting people through those difficult career events, shall we say?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's kind of it relates to what mentorship, it kind of relate. I mean, it relates, not just kind of, but mentorship relates to what we're talking about being open and being transparent about how we feel at work. Because as you know, I've been volunteering to mentor. Most of them are students or young women that are considering to work in tech, and that might be in nonprofit organizations like ulap.org in the Philippines, and I also have locally, so in different places. And based on my experience with mentorship, both coding and non-technical aspects of it, it's very important, because especially in gaining women in tech in the branch, it's because it helps guide those that are new or are still to get into tech, how it is to work as one, like in different roles. And it's also important that we could through mentorship, we could guide them in the different aspects of it, like the technical part. For example, when we talk about technical, when we say I want to work as a cloud developer, and if you're new, you don't know how to start there, because the cloud itself is big. We have Azure, AWS, and then if you choose, I want to choose Azure. So as a mentor, you have to guide also your mentee. Okay, you decided to be Azure, you want to work with Azure, and then you need to choose what role you have: Azure developer, Azure architect. And then also, when you work as an Azure developer, when we zoom in, you want to know also the different technologies there is in Azure. So it's very important with guidance in mentorship, tech and non-technical. Non-technical is the aspect that we talked earlier about being transparent, voicing out, being brave. So yes.
And then helping people to feel confident in doing that, but also providing, I suppose, guidance, right? So It's funny when people come to me with their problems in work. I'm so much better at supporting someone else in their conversations, which I think just goes to show that is why talking and sharing is important, because someone else will always be able to, if it's someone that you trust and who has experience, but who you also know has your best interest at heart, they will, and it's a safe relationship, they will be able to give you constructive feedback. So say, you know, well, maybe next time do this differently, etc. They will help you work on your self-awareness, and be able to reflect, but they will also be there sort of in your corner, you know, like helping you stand up for yourself if that's what you need to do. And I think on the technical side, you're so right. People getting into tech these days, I mean, it's a minefield, because there's just so much that you can do. Every time I even think about, should I start to go down a slightly more technical road, I think, you know, well, what road would I take? And where would I start? And so I think, yeah, mentorship is so important in that aspect, because it could be so overwhelming that people don't make any progress, because they're sort
Yes.
of spinning around wondering which direction to go in, rather than just moving forward, which I would say that is definitely what I have done over the last 2 years
Yes.
with that decision. But so in terms of how to get started with Azure, right? This is where the inspiration for your book came.
Yeah, it relates as well.
Yeah, I think it's just so impressive that you are writing a book, and you're doing this during your weekends, right?
Yeah, sometimes after work, if I still have the energy left after a long day.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
I do. So I'm currently, I started like last summer, end of summer last year. So I started a book project with O'Reilly. It's an American company that does books, technical books mostly, and I'm currently working on a book entitled "Learning Microsoft Azure Cloud Fundamentals and Development" for those that are beginners of cloud computing and Azure, and even intermediate, those that are developers that are still getting started. So I wanted to create a book, even if I haven't done it before, because I think I have good motivations for that.
yeah, so let's talk about those motivations. What made you want to write a book, and this book in particular? What did you see was sort of the gap, or what was the reasons that you thought, right, I need to write a book on how to get started in Azure?
Yes, one of the, I mean, I have one, two, I mean, two reasons. For the major reason that I decided to write a book about Azure, it's because I was in a cloud migration experience as a developer before, where I was involved in migrating an old legacy application to the cloud. But that migration went fiasco. It didn't went to production because the team, the organization, and even the customers were not cloud ready. And
Yeah.
because of that experience, I learned a lot, both tech and non-technical aspect of it. I wanted to create something that will help me learn more about Azure by writing, and at the same time helping beginners in IT organizations learn more about the cloud. And I started with a beginner level book because I want my book to be inclusive to everyone.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my motivation.
And I think so there's a few things there. One, so I've got my head's going running in all directions. So one, cloud migrations failing 9 times out of 10. It's nothing to do with the tech and everything to do with the fact that the company has not embraced the cloud mindset. And they don't realize that it's not just something for the technical team to do. Actually, it's a company-wide culture shift. And then the second thing there is, yes, having something for beginners, because we were discussing this, that actually there's not a whole bunch of content out there at the level 100, 200. And even if there is, it is very tech specific. So something that I've been working on last week and this week was creating a presentation session for the sales team at Dell in the UK to explain what is Azure and why does it matter. And it was, you know what, that's been such a learning process for me, because I always thought that I was great at explaining tech to non-tech, and being that middle person. And I would say that is what I do. But I think I'd been so focused on explaining about the products that I work on, so Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc and tech, that I'd actually become too technical, which is crazy. I had to, pull myself back and sort of pull myself up and start to think about business outcomes and what companies were trying to achieve and their problems, and then start there and then work down. And by the way, it was solved by this product,
Yes.
And I think that from that perspective, from people getting started, there is a lack. There's a lack of resources out there to help beginners get started. And I think that's super important, because like you say, that's how we become more inclusive.
Yes, I agree with you, and I gave you kudos for being the bridge between the technical aspect of what you're doing at work to the non-technical part. And I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer,
Yes.
and I also believe that the more you share and to the audience or to the learner's perspective, the more you learn about the topic that you're talking about. So, as you said, you just mentioned that your colleagues thinks you're too technical, even though you think you're not. But maybe you're getting better. You're better as well as you share. So that's the fun part about building bridges between the technical and non-technical group of people, because that's what makes tech more fun. As what you mentioned also earlier, that tech is all about humans. Anyway, yes. So it's amazing what you do, Lisa, and I'm inspired to hear that you're making a difference at work that way. And we need more expert, also building bridges to the other groups of people that are beginners of tech, and that's, as you said, makes tech more inclusive for everyone.
Yeah. And I think, even in my head, I've always thought about this tech and non-tech group. But I mean, what this week has shown me is that, again, that's siloed thinking, and that's placing people in groups. You're technical, you're not technical. Whereas actually that's not the case. People are on a sort of, I would say, a spectrum of being, business to technical. And there's so many different types of people in between, with different skills and different areas of knowledge. And yeah, I just want to make it more comfortable for people to, one, ask questions, show them that it's okay not to know everything, and also show them that, as someone who is traditionally not technical and that I'm not hands-on and I don't have certs, etc., I can talk confidently about cloud and its benefits and its business outcomes. And what I'm trying to do at work is I'm trying to build the sales team's confidence so that they can have better conversations with their customers, so they don't get scared by, hearing the word cloud and run away, so that they feel confident and they lean in and they can speak to their customers and find out what exactly is it that they're trying to achieve with cloud. What are they looking to change in their business or transform in their business. And so, yeah, I think that's what there was a point in me the other week where I thought, I have been doing this now for almost 10 years. I've been trying to persuade people for 10 years that cloud is not the enemy, and all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of thinking, at some point I need to move, I don't know, up the stack or into something else. But it's definitely the people element that keeps me coming back, and seeing people step out of their comfort zone and not be scared by technology.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I'm excited for this book, because I think that'll be on my list of, I've got a whole bunch of links that I just share to people. So I'm
Yes.
check out this unit on Microsoft Learn on what is Azure, and watch this quick video. And I'm always looking for nice pieces of content that are hit at different levels, so that I can share it with people who need it. So I'm excited about the book. When are you planning to launch the book?
The book is a 1-year project, so I'm working on. I'm almost halfway of the book, so the first 2 chapters are on Row early release on O'Reilly, so they can check it out. You can share it the link later, and then yes, the publication that it will be printed on paper book will be next year. So hopefully, if my motivation and I keep on writing on my weekends, I will make it to the finish line. I'm pretty positive because of my motivation, because it's not easy to write a book, especially a technical book, and as a first time writer, to write one, especially outside my working hours. So it's like it can be like a job itself to work as a writer.
Yeah, that's another full-time job, effectively. But I think, like you say, you will absolutely smash it and meet the deadlines, because your motivations are there and your reasons behind why you want to do this are very real, and they're very linked to your purpose, rather than just, I want to write a technical book because I want to be able to say that I've done that. And going through that process, you will grow so much as well. Your communication skills will improve, your technical writing will improve. I'm sure you'll come up with new concepts along the way of how to explain things to people. So yeah, I'm very excited for that.
Yes, thank you for your support, Lisa.
Okay, you're honestly, Jonah, you're so inspiring. Every single time you
Thank you.
pop up on my social media, I just think that girl is killing it. Like, and you do so much. So let's finish on this. So you do so much for the community, right? You work so hard, and you're doing all this extracurricular activities. We spoke about this a little briefly in our catch up. How do you balance that with making time for you? Is that something you've struggled with, or do you try hard to make sure that you also have time for you?
I cannot say that I'm struggling, but how I handle it is that I try to find balance between work and private time as well. So we have Monday to Friday work, and then I also have weekends for private personal time, and also book. So what I try to do is to make sure that when I work and prioritize as well my time for myself, and finding that balance, because too much of work is not good as well. You need to have that balance in taking care of yourself, because just like what we discussed last time when we did our catch up, that you said exactly, I cannot forget it, you cannot feel an empty glass, something about glass.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes, that's right. And I like that. I like what you said, that you cannot just keep giving all the time. You also have to recharge yourself. And also one thing is to learn how to say no.
Yes.
Because it's not easy sometimes, especially if we're passionate about helping and like contributing to the community. So it's finding balance for work, self, and community.
Yep. And so I've always said you can't pour from an empty cup, because, to be honest, I've spent a lot of my life trying to pour from an empty cup. And not so much of my time making sure that the cup is full of goodness. And actually it was I think it was last year, just before I took some time off, I actually came across a slightly different version, is that you should never really be pouring from your cup. You should make sure that you are overflowing, and therefore you're giving the extras to people. And I think that really changed things for me, because ultimately, if you are like we like helping, we like giving, we like supporting other people. That is also where we get our happiness from. But if we do that to the point where we burn out, it also stops us being able to do that for people. And then you get into this vicious circle of being burnt out and being unhappy. So since I took my break last year, and I would highly advise to anyone who is feeling like they are reaching a burnout point to take a break. Yes, the world moves on and things continue, but you can always come back. What I would do differently is I would try and not get to the point where I needed it so bad that I had to just sort of disappear. I would try and plan it in, maybe set a time frame and have some kind of, plan as to what you're going to do with that time differently, and a plan to come back. Because when I came back, I actually was so overwhelmed because I was so worried about coming back. But taking that break, it made me realize that you can take a break. Yes, the world continues on, but you can join back in. There's no problem there. I would try and do it before you really need to do it, and I would definitely advise making sure that you recharge, that you are doing stuff for you, that you're taking care of you so that you can continue to give to other people. And I would say I've become pretty fierce now at protecting my own peace and my own time outside of work, and not just doing things because I feel like other people expect me to, or they think I should. But it takes practice, and I don't think it's something I will ever, nail 100%. I feel like we're always evolving and growing, and we always make mistakes and we always trip up. And I think that's okay. But I like what you said, balancing work, community, and personal.
Yes,
I think
that's
in
right.
making sure you sort of have activities in each of those groups is a good way to go about it.
Yes.
I think I'm going to take those 3 buckets and write them in my OneNote, and then have a think about what am I doing in each of these areas to make sure that I'm still balanced.
Yes, that's right. It's really good. It's really important to find that balance, because I was also in a burnout one time with that like experience I told you about, the company that I felt stressed. So I actually had to take a break for a month before I had to start a new job. So
Yes.
it's really important that the self awareness, that you don't have to wait to be there in that like worst scenario. If you're self-aware that you need that time for yourself and time to recharge, you have to plan it and do it.
Right.
Otherwise, you cannot compromise your health and how you feel just for your stressful job or stressful group of people. So you have to take care of yourself, as you said. It's very, very important to do that. And I have something to share related to this, because there was one time that I have a lot of things, like as you say, I have my buckets, and in my buckets I have small stuff in the bucket. So I was asked by one of my leaders at work, Jonah, which one do you want to remove from this part of what you do the entire week? Do you want to remove your tech events, your community stuff? And I said a big no. Because I said, as you said, Lisa, when we do community, that we're passionate about, that's how I gain energy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
filling my cup.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like thinking that it doesn't in this community part of it, it fills my cup, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time you pour it out as well. So it's important that you fill in and pour out in a balanced way, that it's not that it doesn't get not proportional, if you know what I mean. Because we both
Yeah.
like community, but it can be too much
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes back to that self-awareness and practicing saying no and not feeling guilty. And, I'm still trying to find my feet with that. So I've come back in and I've started with my podcast. But even then I've not done too much else yet. I've still not sort of submitted any talks, and I've still not really said yes to appearing on many things. And I think one side of me panics because I think I'm missing all these events and I should really say yes to but do you know what? Ultimately, I am not ready to do that. I don't have the space and the time and the energy to do those things to the extent that I'd want to do them. So I'd want to do well, and also to be in a place, like you say, to get energy back from them as well. So I'm very much, I would say, still easing back into that and trying to find my balance. But I think you're totally right. You can fall into the trap of doing so much because it's fun, it's great, it does fill your cup. But at the end of the day, prepping talks, presenting, even having conversations like this, it takes a lot out of you because you care so much. So you're putting so much into it, that's going to naturally be draining. But I like the fact that you had that conversation at work as well. That's really, that's a good conversation to have at work, is to, sitting down and be like, look, these are all the things I do. These are the things that I love doing. Here, are there any areas where we can sort of take things off my plate? Which I've also had the experience of doing over the last year. And it can be scary because you feel like you're giving things away. And you want to do all the things, but I think it's a very mature and grown up thing to do. I'm not sure I would have been able to do it if I was younger. But yeah, as I've got older, I feel like.
I see your cat now. I saw.
I was wondering if he was going to come up and say hello, because he was actually getting quite vocal, but he's trying to find a spot for his afternoon nap, I think. To be a cat.
Yes.
But
I have a dog, Lawrence. What's the name of your cat?
Zach.
Zach, yes. Yeah. I have Lawrence. He's not here, but he's somewhere downstairs.
That's such a cool name, by the way, for a dog. I love that name.
Yes.
Pets are definitely also a great way to chill out and keep you balanced. Yeah, definitely. So Jonah, thank you so much for joining me and having this really, really open and candid chat. I've really loved it, and hopefully we can stay in touch. And yeah, I can't wait to see your book and everything else that you have coming. Keep it up. You're an absolute inspiration. Your story is inspirational, and keep sharing what you do with the community, because it's amazing.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. It's really awesome to speak with you and to chat with you about so many things, not just tech stuff. So that's what we need together. So yeah, I love it, and I hope that our audience, listeners, get inspiration from what we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do, let us know. Tweet me, tweet Jonah. Let us know what you thought about the podcast. Maybe you listen to this while going on a walk. It's quite a long one, but definitely reach out if anything resonated with you. And thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you all again next time.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.